All right, so looks like we're diving into influencer marketing today. Got a whole bunch of articles and research here,
Yeah.
all about how to use those online personalities to give your business a boost.
It's huge right now.
Yeah, even bigger now in 2025. This article here says March 1st is the date on it.
And what's interesting is how much it's changed, you know? It's not just celebrities doing endorsements anymore.
Right, it's way more strategic now.
It is.
Like it's more like having one of your really well-connected friends online vouching for you.
Exactly.
But instead of just any friend, it's someone who already speaks to, like your perfect customer.
Yeah.
Kind of like this article used the example of like fitness apparel brands working with fitness influencers,
Yeah.
which makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And that's why, no matter what stage you're at, whether you've been doing this forever or just starting out, the first step is always
Oh, for sure.
nailing down your goals and your target audience.
Yeah. Like who are you really trying to reach?
Yeah.
And what message are you trying to get across? Which leads to the next big question, right? How do you pick the right influencers? Feels like everyone's got a social media account these days.
It does. It can be overwhelming, but there are a few key things to look for.
Okay, yeah.
This article here talks about relevance, engagement rate, and authenticity.
So it's not just about finding someone with, like, a zillion followers.
Right. It's not just about the sheer number.
I was going to say, like, I'm guessing 10,000 really engaged followers who are actually into the content are way more valuable
Yeah.
than, like, a million who just scroll on by.
Absolutely. Engagement rate is huge E.
Yeah.
It basically measures how much people are actually interacting with their content. Are they liking, commenting, sharing? That shows there's actual interest there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there's authenticity, right? You can tell when someone really loves a product
Oh, yeah.
versus just, like, reading a script, you know?
Oh, totally. And that's where it gets really interesting, right? Imagine you've got, say, an eco-friendly skincare line, partnering with an influencer who's really passionate about sustainability.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, it just clicks. Their recommendations are going to resonate because it aligns with what they believe in. This article actually had a good example of that. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. The one about the gluten-free baking kits and finding a micro-influencer who was, like, all about that niche.
Exactly. Perfect example of how those values and interests matching up creates like a really genuine partnership.
Yeah. Okay, so we've defined our goals, we've figured out our target audience, found some influencers who are, like, a perfect fit. What's next? Do we just, like, throw money at them and call it a day?
Definitely not. This article talks a lot about how it needs to be a two-way partnership.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
And it's sense to give them some creative freedom.
Yeah.
They know their audience better than we do.
Exactly. It's about collaborating, trusting their expertise.
Yeah.
A scripted ad just won't land the same way as something that feels, natural, part of their usual content.
Like that example in the article where the vegan bakery let the influencer actually bake with their products. Way more engaging than just holding up a box of muffins.
Totally. It's about creating a real story around the product. That's what connects with people.
Right, okay.
And that's what drives results.
This is all making so much sense, but how do we know if it's actually working? Got to talk about tracking results at some point.
Yeah, we do. Time to get a little nerdy with the metrics.
Bring on the numbers.
But don't worry, it's not rocket science.
This article breaks it down pretty well, right? We're talking about engagement on the influencer's posts, then traffic to our website, and then ultimately those sales.
Exactly.
It's about seeing those numbers move,
Yeah.
not just hoping for good vibes. Haha.
Exactly. Imagine, you're running an online pet accessory store. You partner with a pet influencer.
Oh,
You'd expect to see a spike in website visits after they post, and hopefully a bunch of sales for those cute dog sweaters or whatever they're showcasing.
All right, so what about businesses on a tighter budget? Can they still get in on the influencer action?
Absolutely. That's where micro-influencers come in. This article highlights them as a really budget-friendly option.
Right, smaller following, but maybe a way more engaged audience because it's so niche, right?
Exactly. And because they're often focused on a specific area, their recommendations carry more weight with their followers.
It all comes back to that quality over quantity thing, huh?
It does. It's not one size fits all. It's about finding those unique partnerships that really work.
Gotcha. But we got to be realistic, right? No guarantees in life.
True. Even this article had a little disclaimer. Results may vary.
Which makes sense when you think about it.
It does.
Like a trendy beauty brand is probably going to see faster results than, say, a software company selling to other businesses.
Right. Depends on the industry, the product, all sorts of factors.
So even with the perfect influencer and a great strategy, there's no magic bullet.
It's about testing, tracking, refining over time.
This has been super insightful. I feel like we've covered the basics of influencer marketing,
Yeah.
but I'm ready to dig a bit deeper.
I'm glad you're finding it valuable. And yeah, there's always more to explore. One thing that comes to mind is that whole concept of engagement rate. We touched on it briefly, but it's worth diving a little deeper.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. It's easy to say, like, look for high engagement, but how do you actually measure that? What even makes a good engagement rate?
Right. It's not just about looking at the raw number of likes or comments. You have to consider it in relation to the influencer's follower count.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically a percentage that shows how actively their audience interacts with their content.
Got it.
A good engagement rate, it varies depending on the platform and the niche, but generally anything over like a few percent is pretty solid.
Okay, so a few hundred likes might look good on its own, but if the influencer has like 1 million followers, that's actually not that great.
Exactly. Got to look at the bigger picture. And there are tools out there that can help you calculate these things and compare influencers.
Oh, nice. So we don't have to do all the math ourselves.
You got it.
Speaking of getting into the nitty-gritty, let's talk about tracking results.
Yeah.
We mentioned the key metrics, earlier engagement, website traffic, sales. But what about the actual process? How do we set up tracking and make sure we're measuring the right things?
Right. So this is where it can get a bit technical, but there are definitely ways to simplify it. A lot of social media platforms have built-in analytics dashboards.
Wow.
They give you a basic overview of how your campaigns are performing, so you can see things like reach, impressions, click-through rates, and so on.
Okay, that's a good start.
It is.
But what about tracking the impact on our own website? Ultimately, we want to see those influencer campaigns bringing in traffic and turning those visitors into customers, right?
Exactly. That's where tools like Google Analytics come in. You can set up what are called UTM parameters.
Ooh, fancy.
Yeah, but they're not as complicated as they sound. They basically tag the traffic coming from the influencers' posts.
Okay.
So you can see exactly how many people visited your website from that specific campaign, what pages they looked at, and whether they actually made a purchase.
So we can really zoom in and see which partnerships are actually making a difference.
Yeah, exactly. And that data is super valuable because then you can refine your approach over time. You can see what's working, what's not, and make adjustments as needed.
It makes me think about that disclaimer we mentioned earlier. Results may vary. Now I'm seeing how important it is to be data-driven. It's not just about crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. It's about actually measuring, analyzing, and optimizing.
Right. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
And it's not always about chasing the biggest numbers either.
Yeah.
Sometimes a smaller, more engaged audience is actually more valuable than a massive following that's not really paying attention.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, that perfect alignment
It is.
between the influencer, the audience, and the brand.
Exactly. And building those authentic partnerships that just feel genuine and engaging.
Speaking of partnerships, I'm curious what you think about the human element of all of this. We've been talking data and metrics, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with real people.
Absolutely.
How do we cultivate those relationships and make sure everyone feels valued?
That's such an important point. It's so easy to get caught up in the numbers and forget about that human connection. Building strong relationships with influencers is key.
So how do we do that? What are some practical tips?
Well, I think it starts with treating them like partners, not just paid promoters.
Right.
Communicate clearly, be respectful of their time, and value their input.
So go beyond that transactional mindset.
Exactly. And remember, influencers are busy people. They're getting bombarded with requests all the time.
Yeah.
So if you want to stand out, make sure your approach is personalized.
No generic mass emails.
Definitely not. Take the time to get to know the influencer, their content, their audience. Show them you've done your research and that you genuinely believe they're a good fit.
It all ties back to that authenticity thing.
Yeah.
People can tell when a partnership's not genuine.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Authenticity is key, both in how you approach influencers and in the content they end up creating.
Makes sense. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about setting goals, choosing the right influencers, tracking results, and even building relationships.
We have.
But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the idea that influencer marketing can work for any business and budget.
Right.
Can you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. I think there's this misconception that influencer marketing is just for big brands with tons of money.
Uh-huh.
But that's not true at all. There are so many ways to approach it, and you can tailor your strategy to your needs and your resources.
So even a small business with a limited budget can still make it work.
Absolutely. It might mean working with micro-influencers instead of celebrities, or focusing on organic collaborations rather than paid sponsorships. But there are definitely options out there.
That's encouraging to hear. It feels like influencer marketing is becoming more accessible.
I agree. I think that's what makes it so exciting. It's a constantly evolving landscape with so much potential for creativity.
I'm feeling inspired to start trying it out in my own business,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm still a little intimidated by the whole thing.
I get it. It can feel overwhelming. Where do we even begin, right?
Right.
I think the first step is to just start exploring.
Exploring sounds less scary than diving in headfirst. Haha. So where should we start that exploration?
I'd say start by taking a look at what other businesses in your industry are doing,
Okay.
What kind of influencer partnerships are they forming? What kind of content are they putting out there?
So I kind of like competitive research, but for influencers.
Exactly. It's a good way to get a feel for what's working, what's not, and what might actually resonate with your audience.
And then from there, we can start like identifying potential influencers who fit with our brand and our values.
Yep. And don't be afraid to think outside the box. Sometimes those unexpected partnerships can be the most successful ones.
It's all about finding those hidden gems, those influencers who are really passionate and have that real connection with their audience.
Exactly. When you find those partnerships, that's where the magic happens.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like
Yeah.
I knew a little about influencer marketing before, but now I see it as this whole new world of possibilities.
I'm glad to hear that. It's always changing, and I think the most important thing is to stay curious and keep experimenting.
And remember, you don't need a huge budget or a celebrity to get started.
You don't.
It's about finding those genuine connections and building relationships that benefit everybody.
Well said. And who knows, maybe our listener will be sharing their own influencer marketing success story on a future deep dive.
That would be awesome. All right, so I think it's time to wrap things up.
Yeah.
We've covered so much today. We talked about like what influencer marketing, even IS, all the way to strategies, metrics, and building those relationships. Hopefully you're feeling inspired to explore this marketing channel for your own business.
Absolutely. The key is to start small, experiment, track your results, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Great advice. And with that, we'll leave you to do some brainstorming. Until next time.